Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William White, yes, an official scientist of the Midnight Society. Once again, you have gathered the courage to venture into the darkness of the fox den to awaken me from my slumber. For you need some assistance with werewolves and dogmen. Absolutely delicious. Thank you for allowing me to replenish myself with lost nutrients. Yes, sometimes I become so weak in my shackles. Without further ado, it is once again time for Midnight Lycanthropy to take a walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. It is again time to nerd out with one of the official scientists of the Midnight Society. Yes, William Scott White is already sitting around the darkness in the fox den as he has set up the late night fire for us as we again burn the timber into the early hours of the morning. Mr. White, how you been, man?
I've been good.
This is good. Correct me if I'm wrong here, and also correct me if I am bringing up something that could not occur. I'm a big fan of Cody Lundeen. I used to watch Dual Survival when he was on that. There would be a couple episodes, one specifically where you see it happen. Cody was speaking about how out in the forest, there's basically these massive crevices that are covered up with thin layers of moss, grass, or branches and such. And you could legit just step on this and plummet to an unknown depth, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know how far it is. There was an episode where a bunch of snow is all around and Cody begins to hear running water and starts to think, all right, wait a second, am I in one of these areas that he's previously spoken about? He gets a really large stick, starts to poke down and realize he is. Okay, so he has to be very careful now as to where he can go out and make this big X in the snow for obviously someone to come rescue them. Because to anyone that hasn't seen that, the whole point of the show is for them to obviously show you how to survive the situation, but get out of there as quick as possible, not just sit here and have a weekend in a spot. Either way now, if someone fell down into this crevice, would anyone even know they were down there or see this to even then try to look down with thermals? Would the dog now or dogs even pick up this scent depending on how far down you fell? Could this be a portion of why there are signs up saying do not go past these points in the forest? Food for thought, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that absolutely exists, especially in forests that receive a lot more rain, like, for instance, Oregon and Washington on the western side of the state, where they actually have rainforests. Not only do they have rainforests where plants grow very quickly and very densely. But they also have a very mountainous, rocky sort of terrain, which leads to, the tectonic activity, a lot of water that can lead to the formation of these crevices through various methods. So that makes sense that, in certain areas that would actually be a real peril. Um, yeah, if you were to step on what looked like the forest floor, but it's actually just some leaves and vines, covering up a chasm. Yeah, that would be very difficult to find someone. It would seem like they had just dropped off the face of the earth. Depending on the depth of the chasm and what you hit or get stuck in, you might end up being injured as well. Um, and then on top of that, now you've got this plant matter above you, which would absolutely hinder, thermal and overflights trying to find where you're at. As far as dogs, I'm not an expert on tracking dogs, but I would assume that being stuck down in that crevice, they potentially could find your trail, which would be nice, especially if it led them to that crevice. But you're not going to be emitting a lot more available scent for them actively to find, as you would by being up on their level versus down in some unknown depth of a crevice. That would probably make it harder for them to find you as well. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of natural explanations. Where we are in Ohio and Pennsylvania, Florida as well, a lot of areas where the bedrock is limestone, sinkholes are a very real phenomenon. And you'll be out in the woods and there'll be like a large bowl-shaped basin where basically the bedrock had been eroded away by subterranean water, um, and then eventually the rocks and dirt on top of it just cave in. That that can happen very quickly too. There was a case, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago about a man in Florida who he was asleep in his bed in his home and a sinkhole opened up right under the house and half the house got pulled into the sinkhole, and so did he. And apparently he was unrescuable even though everyone knew what had happened and knew that he had fallen in there. They just, I did never understood why, but they just could not rescue him. So yeah, I mean that potentially could happen, to your campsite, to you walking through the forest, just the wrong place at the wrong time. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different natural explanations for some of these disappearances for sure.
Brilliant stuff right there. Have you ever heard of Mel's Hole?
Yeah,
Okay. I am not going to fully dive into that at this moment, but just to anyone out there, you can go look into it. It's extremely bizarre.
this unknown hole of unknown depth.
It was just really interesting. And also May Koo, who's our spelunker and paleontologist, May Koo has found some really cool things. She was thinking, wow, wait a second. Look at this. Is this some sort of culture that was spending time in here? But as she would investigate more, you could see the pattern of water, right, and flooding that had actually pushed these arrowheads into these cave systems. The people that have been found in the caves, which are, again, we haven't explored many of them. The conclusion was, again, from the evidence, the flash floods, they were caught up in that. You could see where the water levels were, and it quickly just disposed of these people into the caves because it's like a big drainage system, right? Again, now, even if animals aren't involved or cryptids and such, I'm still telling everybody the caves have something to do with this, whether it's what we just spoke about, falling into it, being hit with flash floods, or even if something is pulling you in there.
What about feral people who, live in the caves? What about maybe population of feral type people who've lived in the caves for a very long time and may have even changed, evolved to better live in those caves? When you think about it, this is the difference between like a domesticated dog and a wild dog, or a even a domesticated dog and a wolf. Um, Humans are soft. Our technology has made us soft. It's also made us dominant. But when you take away the technology from the modern man and place him, with no tools in the wild, he's going to struggle to figure it out. Some will, some won't. But someone who's grown up basically only using their hands and feet and brain and maybe some very primitive tools, um, live their whole life. Yeah, their life's probably going to be shorter and more violent, but they're going to be a lot better in that situation than someone who relies on their technology. So yeah, someone a human who's spent their entire life living in the forest, hunting and surviving, literally hunting animals with his bare hands, or maybe throwing rocks at them, they would probably be quite a challenge for even a very fit, well-trained adult. Just simply because it's a different environment. It's the environment they live in, they train for, and we're out of our environment when we're there. I'd say pretty well out of luck. Honestly, it's a matter of mindset too. What's the difference between, and why do psychopaths or criminals scare reasonable people so much? They don't hesitate, and most people hesitate before they harm someone, even in defense. But they have the advantage. So it's kind of almost the same thing as how people describe seeing cryptids like Dogman or Bigfoot, and just being like frozen solid. Their limbs turn to jelly. Their stomach. They're about to mess their pants. They don't they don't know how to react, right? But if that's your life, then you do know how to react. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point.
Terrifying stuff right there. Do you think the locations that a lot of people see cryptids, it can vary?
I think they could be in any climate. I think that even, in a place like Alaska or northern Canada, that might actually be ideal, because, they're less likely to encounter modern humans who might pose a threat to them. Yeah, I don't think climate would necessarily be an issue. Once again, you could probably break it down into several different types.
Yeah, some great stuff right there for sure. If you had to pick a cryptid that was a little bit more mainstream, meaning like Dogman, Bigfoot, which one do you think would be more responsible if they are going to be taking people?
I think it'd be more likely that Sasquatch would be taking people, just because of the historical accounts. The Native Americans talk about Sasquatch or the hairy man kidnapping their women. And like I said, there are stories of children being, rescued by them and living with them for a period of time. There was a Civil War soldier who was wounded in a battle and left behind, and he ended up in a den, I think like in North Carolina, and was actually, taken care of by these Sasquatch until he escaped. And he got the not that he could understand them, but in his account, he got the vibe that they actually wanted him to kind of marry, if such a thing exists among them, one of their females in their tribe. They're a bit more like us in appearance and probably in behavior. That Sasquatch would be the most likely culprit for like actually kidnapping and kind of adopting or taking into their tribe humans.
Why do you think Sasquatch would be taking people? Do you think it's no different than we look at it as, hey, we're taking something as a pet per se, but then we're still taking it away from something? We took it away because we want it as a pet. We think it's cool, it's fuzzy. Do you think these things would be taking us because they find us interesting? Or do you think there would be maybe some darker inclinations?
If we just assume that they're just natural animals like us, I would say it'd probably be more out of curiosity, because I'm assuming they're pretty intelligent, so they're going to be curious. And seeing these other upright creatures, dominating the world, probably they'd want to understand us as much as they could. The idea of a pet, yeah, I could see that. If we go with the more paranormal, esoteric sort of viewpoint that they're some sort of a biological construct from some other higher intelligence, yeah, they might have ulterior motives, like I've talked about, creatures that seem to feed off people's fear and strong emotions and suffering. Or even, once again, going back to the natural animal standpoint, could be as simple as having some cattle, having a store of food for when you need it. Just like we keep our cows alive, it could be that they might kidnap a human and keep them alive until wintertime, when it's harder to find deer, and then it's dinner time. I don't know.
Creepy stuff right there. Do you have anything else you would like to touch base on tonight, or mention about some of the topics that we did speak about?
I did want to touch on, you had mentioned it in the intro, areas that I think would be most, if we are assuming that Dogman is not a some sort of extra dimensional creature and it's more of a natural animal, I would actually expect them to be in more remote areas, just like wolves and bear, unless they're reintroduced into an area, they tend to avoid humans and they like to be in places where there are less humans. I would imagine that a Dogman would be the same if it was absolutely just a natural animal that just wanted to live and eat and reproduce. Because being that big, it's going to attract attention no matter how stealthy it is. The more eyes are around, the more likely it's going to be seen. And also, the more remote areas are probably going to have a better supply of natural food, prey for it to eat. And a large animal like that is going to be like a 400-pound dog man. It probably need at least 5,000 calories a day. So that's a decent amount of calories. 5,000 calories a day is probably something on the order of a minimum of 10 pounds of meat, and that's assuming that it's not being terribly active. If it all of a sudden it starts going into its 50-mile-an-hour sprints like people say they've seen, it's going to be burning a lot more calories. So that, like I said, assuming it's a natural animal, I think we'd be more likely to find it in places like Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, most of Canada, which most of Canada is empty of human populations, and not in the Midwest, not in Ohio and Pennsylvania, although Pennsylvania has some decent wilderness areas. But then people have been seeing it in areas near large cities and suburbs and farms that have even out in the rural areas of most Midwestern areas, you can't go a mile without crossing a road.
It's great stuff right there. My final thought would be most animals stay away from people, yet what isn't afraid of people? Other people, right? Does this not bring some more merit and credence to the whole feral person topic taking people? Because I'm pretty optimistic a feral person has no fear of people.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I do think they, depending on, like I said, their motives, some might be quite afraid of people, afraid of being discovered, afraid of, being chased down or locked up or whatever. But on the flip side, more aggressive feral people might, view us as clumsy and soft and blind, and unaware, and not be afraid of us at all, and view us more as like I said, a source of resources, whether that's food or scavenging supplies, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an interesting point you brought up about feral people maybe wearing animal skins. I mean, shoot, I've seen some mountain men type guys, reenactors wearing a full bear skin, with the bear head on their, basically as the hood.
Terrifying.
And it really doesn't look right. I'll tell you that. It's kind of a creepy appearance, so you see something like that from behind or the side, or depending on how it's cut, maybe it's hiding their face in the woods. You might interpret that as something totally different.
Ooh, right there. Yes, see, exactly, my friend. That is so terrifying. That's the reason I brought that up. It's proven facts that people that live off the land, whether it's present or past, will wear animal furs.
It's camouflage. Yeah.
Yes. And as a journalist, I'm not a researcher, I'm a journalist. I just go in the direction of the analytics, the numbers, things that present to make sense. And the more, we speak about these things, well, it just seems to start to make a little bit more sense that I do believe people are involved in the aspect of missing people way more than we really think.
People are absolutely terrible, most people anyway, at judging sizes and distances. I just saw an article last week where a school was shut down for a day because the teacher were convinced that there was a mountain lion on the school property. It turned out to be just a very fat, kind of orange-brown colored house cat. Right?
Yep.
But seen at the right distance, maybe not seeing the whole body, your eyes can play tricks on you, and your brain can go someplace else, and so if you said, like I said, I'm 6'4". Today driving home from Lake Erie, stopping at a gas station, same time, I saw two dudes who were at least 6'7" or 6'8", made me feel tiny. big guys, muscular guys. And I mean,
There it
not
is.
that someone living in the wild would necessarily grow that tall, but they might. If they're on an all protein diet, they might. You see some tall guy draped in a wolf skin or bear skin or even a coyote skin, cloak, out in the woods. Distances are a little unknown. You don't know how tall that tree it's standing next to is. Man, you might think that thing's 8 feet tall and not 6 feet tall.
Mhm.
So
Exactly. Such great observations. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with us tonight like you always do, my friend. It's definitely great to link up with you bi-weekly, pick your mind. Thanks again, man.
yeah, always a pleasure.
Ooh, you legends, you, my creatures of the night. Thank you once again for making it this far in the video. If you enjoy our content, please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth to the algorithm. And remember, there are things that are terrifying in the darkness.